thank you very much. It's wonderful to be here with all of you. And LSUK is instrumental in all these studies, so thank you very much. Tracy and lots of other colleagues have actually put it right from the development of the studies to the implementation and as the results come out. So I'm extremely grateful. Which I pointed to you.
Now.
Just some disclosures on funders and lots of other support groups and charities, etc. we work with on the projects. And a big thank you also, recognition for the team back at Queen Mary's who are involved in working on these projects in my group. So our research strategy is fairly simple. You try and pick up more people at risk so we can do more cancer prevention, try and do the cancer prevention a bit better, try and do surveillance a bit better, therefore we try and save more lives. And that's what's illustrated here. So we've heard really nicely from Neil and speakers earlier that if you take the womb bar, that's a picture of the womb in the center, and the white things on the side are the ovaries, and the long thing, the pink thing above it on the sides that way are the tubes. So you have a picture of the womb, the tubes, and the ovaries, and that's what it looks like inside the tummy. This is a picture through what we call a laparoscope, which is a telescope. And if you take the womb out, you take the tubes and ovaries out, then you don't get womb cancer, and you don't get ovarian cancer or tubal cancer in Lynch syndrome patients. So it's very, very effective. So it's an effective method to reduce risk, and we need to broaden access to this if we want to prevent cancers. We've just had the discussion on the impact of early menopause. So going into early menopause has a number of consequences. You've got hot flushes, sweats, irritability, mood swings, risk of osteoporosis, or thinning of the bones, and high risk of heart disease later on in life. And if you don't take HRT, you can even die from heart disease later on in life, increasing deaths from heart disease. Also, there's emerging data on neurocognitive and other problems. So, early menopause has long-term detrimental health consequences which can be ameliorated by HRT, but it's not the same as having their own hormones. So patients who have had early menopause and take HRT tell us they feel better. The scientific data shows that they do feel better. There's an improvement in functioning, reduction in symptoms, better sexual function, but it's not the same as having your own hormones without the ovaries coming out. So sort of a halfway house, you could say. But not having HRT is quite detrimental. So the various issues you have to consider when you do a preventive hysterectomy. Issues around fertility, children, the age at which to have it, the risk of cancer, the impact of menopause, and access to HRT, also the gene, the specific risk associated with the gene. All these things go into decision making, and decision making is not easy or straightforward. It can be complicated, requires support. You need to speak to someone who knows what they're talking about. It's important to have the menopause and HRT discussion up front. I think that should be sorted well before you needs to go to the decision-making process. So quality of life becomes really important. And so one of the studies we're going to talk about just now is called PRESCORES, and we're trying to address what's the quality of life after preventive hysterectomy, particularly in patients with Lynch syndrome. And that hadn't been addressed before. So clearly there's a reduction in cancer risk, and we find there's a reduction in cancer varying, but then we spoke about the problems with early menopause. So PRESCORES is a study which we ran across the UK, and the number of colleagues sitting in the audience also contributed there, so thank you. And this was done with LSUK. And we tried to address what's the quality of life after preventive hysterectomy. So we follow NICE methodology for this. NICE suggests you have to use a particular standardized questionnaire to assess quality of life, and that's what we have used in the study. It's called an EQ5D questionnaire for quality of life. And LSUK, you were involved in the development, the design, the framing of this, development of the protocol, part of the steering group. And this questionnaire was then sent out to about 4,000 people with Lynch syndrome across the UK. 1,300 consented, and we have data from 1,114 participants. It's quite a substantial number. So what do we find? It looks like a busy slide, but the key message is that you find a detriment to the quality of life in premenopausal women. There isn't an impact in postmenopausal women. There's a small impact overall, but it's driven rarely by an impact in premenopausal women. And I think that's really coming not from removal of the womb, but probably removal of tubes and ovaries, which causes premature menopause and the consequences we discussed. We see the similar sort of level of impact also in BRCA carriers. It's not in this data set, but in other published data sets you find that similar sort of level of impact in premenopausal hysterectomy or removal of the tubes and ovaries in BRCA carriers. So we do, and there's a greater impact at 4 months. It probably lasts for about 2 years and then it goes away. Then you don't get so much of an impact. And you don't see that if someone's gone through the menopause already and has a hysterectomy. So the main detriment in quality of life is in premenopausal hysterectomy. That's the red boxes you can see. So there's no overall association between time since, because we sent the question to people and sort of approximately half the people had hysterectomy and half the people had not had hysterectomy. So we could compare the two groups. And we didn't find a huge difference after 2 years from time since hysterectomy on the quality of life. And we find a reduction in cancer worry scores. So people who do have the hysterectomy have much less worry about cancer in the future, naturally. But we do document that objectively in that data set. The other, I think, important, useful message is when we compare the quality of life in Lynch syndrome women and we sort of compare it with normative data from the general population, we find they match up. So it's reassuring in that sense. The quality of life in women who have Lynch syndrome is not very different from the English general population. And you can see the lines overlap. That means they're quite similar. So there is good published data, including the nice titles, and to show that doing a preventive hysterectomy in women who've had Lynch syndrome is something that should be done. You save lives, you prevent cancers, and it's cost effective for the health system to invest in it and do that. One of the questions we've asked ourselves is, well, there are other people who don't have Lynch syndrome but be at increased risk of womb cancer. We've just now heard of situations where people may have womb cancer but may not have mismatch repair deficiency also. So, and there could be other risk factors for womb cancer. So you could put a lot of these risk factors together and give someone a lifetime risk of womb cancer. So what should be the lifetime risk threshold at which you could offer preventive interventions like hysterectomy or the Mirena coil, which is a progestogen coil, which we mentioned, which can go in the womb and can halve your risk of womb cancer. And we could use the information we've collected in this study, and we build complex models that are not going into too much detail, and we find that at about, it's probably cost effective to offer it at 11 to 14% risk. This is much lower than the risk we find in all the 4 Lynch syndrome genes. So it's a bit lower than that. And for the Mirena, it's probably about a 4 to 6%, so maybe a 2-fold level of risk. If someone doubles their level of risk of womb cancer, it might be useful to consider using medical prevention. But a hysterectomy, you're probably looking at 4 or 5 times the level of risk in the population for offering a hysterectomy. So these papers are being written up at the moment; they're not published. That's work that's ongoing in the team. The other thing we're doing at the moment is we're doing patient acceptability studies around this. So we're going out into a general population and asking people what they feel about these levels of risk and whether they would find these things acceptable. You mentioned DETECT2. DETECT2, one of the challenges is how do we implement gene testing to identify people with Lynch syndrome, whether they've had womb cancer or ovary cancer or bowel cancer. And given the scale of gene testing health systems and we in the UK also need to do, and possibly other cancer types for which this is likely to be offered in the future, the scale is just going to increase. So we need to look at new, different scalable methods of delivering this so that more people can benefit and there's more equity across the board. And this is a study where we are offering testing to people directly at home using a saliva-based DNA test. So you don't have to come into hospital to have a test. You can spit in a tube. And we're going to be comparing it to how clinicians offer it in the hospital, so cancer clinicians. So instead of seeing your cancer clinician and having a blood test, you could receive some information, watch something on your phone. So you can download an app, and it's available on Android, it's available on Apple, it's available also on a web interface on an iPad, and you can consent, therefore, directly, digitally, sit at home, talk to your family, friends, decide if you want the test, and you can do everything sitting at home. And we send it to your house in the home, at home, you can spit in the tube, send it to us, and we send you the result, both to you and your cancer doctor and your GP, everybody gets the result. So where fitting counseling, etc. is offered on the app. This is a study which is therefore running at the moment. And we hope to recruit at least about 630 people to this. We have recruited about 450 people so far. So we have 28 sites across the country. And so you can see this is an example of screenshots, so you can read as much information as you want. You can have more detail, less detail. There are videos in it translated into 5 languages aside from English. People can watch the videos. If you watch the videos, none of them are more than 2 minutes long, then I think you have enough baseline information. As a clinician, I'm comfortable that you have enough information to make a decision whether you'd like to proceed or not. You can also call a telephone helpline and speak to a counselor. If there's a positive result, then we provide post-test counseling, which is mandatory within the app. And then this goes on to your GP and your cancer clinician. So the 28 sites set up. We hope to keep recruiting till the end of this year, and then there'll be a year's follow-up and then the trial visit. But it provides another scalable strategy. So we also do one-to-one interviews, collecting a lot of quantitative data, and there's an economic analysis being run in the study to see if there's a more cost-efficient way to scale up. And again, in the development of the trial, Tracy and lots of colleagues from here at SUK were deeply involved. So thank you for your support. One of the challenges is training clinicians. We heard about doing gene testing at cancer diagnosis, and we built some training modules for gynecologists or gynecology MDT health professionals, so we rephrase that. And this is available on e-learning for health. I'm told after COVID training modules, this is the only thing that's free on e-learning for health. It's also on the Integrity platform, which is the international platform. So we made it freely available through various cancer societies, both in the UK and globally. And it's been downloaded over 500 times so far, and more from low middle income countries. The maximum download is actually from Southeast Asia, South Asia, those parts of the world. I'm going to talk a bit about PRESCORES, that's offering gene testing to everybody. We know that family history-based approach to gene testing, the same thing in Lynch syndrome. The Amsterdam 2 criteria misses about 70% of Lynch syndrome carriers if we just use the Amsterdam 2 criteria. And the same thing we find with other genes like BRCA genes. And there's huge underutilization of gene testing. 95% of the people who have Lynch syndrome probably don't know about it. So, why use a test which misses, 50 to 80% or 70% of people who have the disease? And the other problem, as I mentioned, is why wait for people to get cancer to identify people in whom you can prevent cancer? So for me, that's if you pick up someone who's got cancer, then pick up a gene mutation, and that's a failure of cancer prevention. And offering testing to everybody can change that approach, can change this paradigm. It's being done in the Jewish population through the NHS Jewish BRCA trial, which is being implemented for BRCA genes in the high prevalence population, so people who are more commonly may have a BRCA gene mutation. And that's been running quite well. In fact, 30,000 people have been tested, and we've identified 650 carriers. And in 2 years, that program, NHS program, has done what the NHS system did in the last 20 years, the number of carriers in the Jewish population. So flipping the paradigm, I think, is quite powerful. You can certainly accelerate the number of people you can identify and do more kinds of prevention, early diagnosis. So in Protect C, we are offering, you can see MLH1, MSH2, and MSH6. We're not doing PMS2, but we're offering these 3 genes along with some breast and ovarian cancer genes. And we also do personalized breast and ovarian cancer risk. And it's again, app-based tool. We'll be working with an organization called NHS Digitrials, who can directly approach people and invite them, but also through word of mouth. And you can download the app. And for people, we're obliged to recruit depending on the UK population. We want to mirror the population. So we set ourselves certain criteria on whom to invite, but people can register. And if you get invited to participate in the study, then again, it's a saliva-based testing pathway at home. We have the 9 videos in this. So it's taken 2.5 years to go through the process, working with lots of patient groups, including representatives from LSUK, to build this. And it's an iterative process where we built the app, which has all the information that someone would need to make a decision to undergo gene testing or not. So we had 10 development workshops, and we have built 9 animation videos in 5 languages plus English, which cover all the issues to think about if you want to have a gene test or not. And for the person, for the patient, or the participant, is one interface, but it's quite a complex digital architecture at the background. We're talking to 3 other different systems. It's a lot of coding, programming, digital information moving backwards and forwards between systems. But it provides a way in which you can scale. You can directly book into a counselor's calendar. You don't need to go to someone, call them, book an appointment, that sort of thing. You can directly book an appointment with a counselor's calendar, or press a button on your app on the phone, and it goes to a phone line for someone to pick up the call. There is that level of support right through the testing pathway, and anybody who's found to be increased risk will be offered post-test counseling. Pre-test counseling is optional. It links directly to the genetics lab, so once you consent, the lab directly sends you the kit and you can track the kit. So we are tracking both ways for the lab and for the person. There isn't a bottleneck of packing kits and selecting people, etc. It's quite digitally scalable. This probably the volume, but it gives you an idea of what's happening inside.
Breast, ovary, bowel and womb cancer account for half of all cancers in women. Protect C is a research study offering genetic testing to see if you have a genetic change that increases your risk of breast, ovary, bowel and or womb cancer. We will also provide you with your individual breast and ovary cancer risk. This is done by combining your health and lifestyle information with the results from your genetic test. If you find out that you are at increased risk of any of these cancers, there are ways to help you manage your risk through the NHS. This may include screening to find cancers earlier when they are easier to treat, and surgery or medication to prevent cancers from developing. This can save lives. Currently in the NHS, genetic testing is only available to people who meet certain criteria. For example, those who have had certain cancers or have a strong family history of cancer. But the current NHS approach misses over half of people at increased risk. Protect C is testing a new approach, offering genetic testing to women over the age of 18, regardless of whether they or their families have had cancer. Protect C is a completely digital study. It will give you access to an app developed specially for this study. This app contains information to help you decide if you would like to have genetic testing. If you decide to have genetic testing, we will send you a spit collection kit in the post. Specially trained counsellors are available should you need support in making your decision, to discuss your results and what they mean for you and your family. PRESCORES will assess how many people decide to have genetic testing, their experiences, and how this affects their quality of life, satisfaction, and mental well-being. We are interested to find out how many people found to be at increased risk take up screening and prevention options. We will also find out if this way of offering genetic testing is affordable for the NHS.
So there's an 8-year follow-up in the study. It's designed to collect all the data we need to provide an evidence base to make a decision on whether this is an appropriate way to take forward. And there's huge acknowledgement to the teams involved in the program, the large number of people, large number of groups, etc. Thanks. So that's Bristol's talk to some of the studies we are running. So we've spoken about preventive hysterectomy and the impact on quality of life, what maybe the new thresholds may be for preventive hysterectomy moving forward, maybe some acceptability work around it, and new scalable strategies both at cancer diagnosis as well in the general population. And again, a huge thank you to all of you, and you're all part of the work we're doing. So thank you very much.
He's amazing, isn't he? Okay, so any questions for Ranjit? Yes.
So I had my hysterectomy 8 years ago and was left for 2 years just winging it. I'm now 52, 53 this year, and I'm still on HRT because I had that 2-year gap. I'm now worried that I've probably been on that for too long, and do I need to come off?
Okay. I have a mic here. Oh, thanks. Sorry. I got a mic.
Oh, you're wearing one.
So the average age of menopause is 51, but it goes right from 46, 47 to 58. Needs a conversation with your gynecologist. The conversation will be very similar to someone who's not got a cancer gene. So your risks and pros and cons of continuing your HRT should have a similar sort of conversation as someone who's not had preventive hysterectomy and is considering HRT. Yes, you can keep taking it for a few years, 4 more years, but it requires that conversation. In the perimenopausal age group, one, you're only taking estrogen or HRT, so that's a much better risk profile than progestogen. Hopefully, you're taking it through the skin, either through a gel or a patch. Yeah, that's a much safer side effect profile to do because it avoids the liver metabolism and clots and other risks. And you could safely take it for another few more years, I would have thought, but it needs a conversation. I think revisiting it at 51 or so is probably the right thing to do. We have put in the NICE guidelines the importance of HRT, the need for multidisciplinary teams, and the need for pathways to be established to do that. And really trusts and colleagues who are working and supporting women going through this, use Avalanche, for example, need to take cognizance of it. So it's in the guideline, it's in NICE, but the implementation, as you have seen and other colleagues have seen, is patchy and not quite where it needs to be.
Ranjit, can I pose a challenging question? I have a friend who doesn't know why you have to stop taking HRT when menopause would normally happen. We're the only primate that has a menopause. The other primates don't. You know, and there's arguments that it was evolved as a way of surviving as a tribe if the older women stopped having children. But in the modern era where women will live until they're 146 and forget what we look like, you know, why stop? I mean, you know, why are we not looking for ways to keep HRT going longer, given all those other medical effects of losing a female?
No, I think that's a valid point. We don't necessarily stop, but it requires a conversation because the conversation about risks and benefits will change as time goes. Once you hit 60, then you're probably getting more in the risk sort of category. If you're taking estrogen and progestogen, your risk profile is very different. If you've had breast cancer, then the conversation is very different. In receptor positive breast cancer, we're reluctant to give it, but still local HRT value and vagina HIV is quite safe. In receptor negative breast cancer, we do a case by case discussion, involve the breast oncology team, and I have a number of patients with receptor negative breast cancer on HRT. In another population, just to raise the point you raised, to highlight that, the BRCA carriers actually have a high risk of breast cancer. We now have a cohort of patients who had risk-reducing mastectomy, risk-reducing oophorectomy, and are hitting 51, as you said. And actually, their risk of breast cancer because they had mastectomy is lower than the general population. So why stop? So I'm not stopping. We are continuing, but it's an evidence-free zone in those patients. But we are continuing. We have put it in the guideline. Yeah. So I think these are valid points, but it requires conversations and. I think it's unfair to expect primary care colleagues to manage this.
Sure.
So,
it feels like the female lynch community are in a good place to maybe try out. I mean, actually said, what if you did randomise a group of people to carry on at 60 to 65 or something and see, is there any actual health consequences of that? I suspect, properly managed in the ways you described, probably not. Microphone.
64 and still on HRT. On the pouch, having had the prophylactic oophorectomy in 2008. So how many years? 16 years on HRT. I'm happy. Can I stay doing what I'm doing? What happens if I stop? That's the other thing. That's why I'm going to stop.
I don't know the answer till you stop. And it may be different for different patients or different women. You may not find a huge difference if you did stop. On the other hand, you might get some withdrawal symptoms initially because you've been on it for so long and then you stop. But it's possible that in 2-3 months you might adjust to it and be okay. So it's very hard to, there's no way to predict how you might feel.
Like my GP's not worried, but should I be taking further?
Yeah, and I think some of the things you just said, Ranjit, about the different types of, of estrogen, progesterone, patch, whatever, tablets, I think it would be useful to have that information for those who want to keep going. What's the safest way to keep going? I think that's probably the question, isn't it? Nobody wants to take an unnecessary risk, but I know it's clear in the lynch community. And I think the other thing to bear in mind is because of the BRCA community being told not to take HRT because of the breast cancer risk, I think that's the other...
The same thing does not apply to the lynch community. That's the drive home that message. Lynch is different from BRCA. You do not have the risk profile that the BRCA community does. And in the BRCA community, as I highlighted, the patients, there's an increasing group of patients who've taken preventive mastectomy and preventive oophorectomy. And actually the risk profile is lower than anybody in the general population without BRCA walking down the road. So it really is a nuanced conversation with someone who has some expertise in the area.
But the key point is there's half knowledge where you might have a GP who knows about BRCA and thinks it's the same for lynch, and it's not the same for lynch. That's the important.